Welcome back. We are here to talk more about family relationships, why family members don't get along. And in this part, we'll talk about what I call the elephant in the room. Family situations that we say, oh, we don't talk about that here, or we don't want to talk about that. But there's situations that we really have to talk about when our elderly parents need care. I'm Pamela D Wilson, caregiving expert, advocate, and speaker. I am your host and your instructor for this part. Let's get started. We'll do the usual housekeeping tips, and then we will move forward. I use the term elderly parent or elderly parents for the person for whom you care. The outline for this module is in the course materials for the program. You can print it off. Definitely print off the slide handouts for each section so that you can make notes. And the slides are there for you to write on. The ellipses, those dots, are purposely there for you so that you can follow along with me. At the end of Parental Relationships, Siblings, Rivalry, and Self-Interest, you should be able to identify behaviors that parents model for children, how our parents bring us up. You should be able to recognize and reduce family drama, talk about elephant in the room situations, and respond to enabling behaviors in family relationships. The values that we have today reflect what we learned from our parents, what we've learned after moving out of our parents' home, in the workplace, and throughout life. We translate and continue to mold these values as we age. Parents model the best and the worst qualities for us as children. The positive qualities help us through challenging situations. We can choose how to respond to the qualities of our aging parents that we view as positive or negative. Depending on the situation between parents and children, negative aspects can have very long-lasting effects. If we have children, modeling positive caregiving actions set a lifelong example for our children. When I was very young, probably 5, 6 years old, my mother began taking me everywhere to visit my aunts, uncles, grandparents. It seemed that we were always doing something to help elderly family members. I remember these visits so fondly because, of course, the elderly folks doted on me because I was so young. The benefit of having your children participate in these activities with you, in caregiving activities, in family visits, creates a better understanding of what can happen to older people as they age. And it can also create an understanding of the trade-offs that we make in time and money that we'll talk about more to care for elderly parents. Cultural beliefs also impact these behaviors. Cultural beliefs are set within families about caregiving. These beliefs can be about duty and responsibility and the fact that we care for our loved ones. That can be a heavy burden for working adult children. Caregivers, especially if there's a primary caregiver, you may think that you can do it all. Eventually, you can't. You will become exhausted. You will burn out. Keep in mind that finding help within the family through brothers and sisters or help outside the family is the best way to fulfill that duty, that responsibility that you feel to be an active and energized caregiver. Otherwise, as we talked, you will burn out, you'll have poor health, things will happen that you won't be able to care for your parents like you feel that you should. Let's talk for a moment about how parental modeling and habits affect us as children. These can also result in relationship difficulties that we may not have anticipated. If our parents were critical, controlling, harmful, or had substance abuse issues as children, we have reacted to these. So we may have been socially isolated, we may have felt lonely, we may have had low self-esteem because parents who have substance abuse issues can be very unkind to children. We might be extremely self-critical today if we had parents who were perfectionists or expected us to deliver above average results. For example, having straight A's on a report card, excelling as an athlete, learning to play a musical instrument when it really wasn't what you wanted to do. Does any of this sound familiar to you? Did you have a family that when you look back today, you realize that you didn't get along that well, or that you didn't communicate, or that you didn't express love because your parents didn't express love to you as children? These glitches, and I call them glitches, can affect our ability to communicate, to get along with others, to express thoughts or feelings in our life. Being raised in critical, controlling, or negative families can make it challenging to be compassionate, empathetic, or patient with other people because our parents didn't show us those qualities. Based on early childhood parental relationships, we may avoid conflict. We may have difficulty listening to the opinions of others that don't match our own because our elderly parents may have said, "Be quiet, I don't want to hear that," or "What you're saying doesn't matter." We may not be a team player or understand the idea of working together for a mutual benefit. We may have difficulty establishing and maintaining positive relationships with others. These early parental relationships result in difficulties throughout life. They result in what we call personality disorders that we talked about a little bit in the last part. We'll talk more about in this part. I want to talk about some things that I learned from my parents. This is a photo of my father in his Army gear. And what you see on the counter sitting there is my father's shaving cup. He used to use, I don't know if you remember the shaving soap, but you would take the little, see the thing with the red handle? It was a brush and you put it in water and you mix it in the cup and do shaving soap. And when we were young, my dad would let us sit in the bathroom with him in the mornings while he shaved. And he would let us take the brush and we get to put shaving soap all over his face. And then he shaved with a straight razor. All of my brothers and sisters remember that. It was just a very cool thing that my father did for us. Things that we learn from our parents, we carry with us throughout our life, both the good and the bad. My parents were very practical people because they grew up during the Great Depression. Families didn't have a lot of money back then. They had to scrape together and make it through life. My parents were blue-collar workers. They didn't make a lot of money. We didn't have a lot as children. And so as a result, we learned how to do things that saved money or didn't cost money. For example, we lived in Nebraska. My parents had a huge garden in our backyard every single year. And it was a very neat thing because we got to go out and plant seeds with my parents. They grew tomatoes, lettuce, radishes, and we tried things like, broccoli and cabbage and things that didn't always work out. They grew potatoes. We grew strawberries. My mom made jam. She grew cucumbers and made pickles. We had amazing during the summer. Oh my gosh, the meals that we had were fabulous because it was like, well, go pick some lettuce. We'll have some salad for dinner. And we would go out in the backyard and just pick that and pick tomatoes. And if we ever overgrew, my mom would take grocery bags and she would go to the neighbors and give them things out of our garden. My dad loved to garden. So in addition to the vegetables, we had flowers and rose bushes and things in our yard, which were nice things. The neighbors had cherry trees. We had apple trees. My mom would make apple pie. We would trade apples for cherries. The way that translated to me when I grew up was I lived in a home next to an elderly lady. Her name was Agnes. And I had an apple tree in my yard. And Agnes said, well, spray that tree every year. And when you have apples, I'll make you things in return for, guess what? I mowed Agnes's lawn every week. When it snowed in the winter, I would shovel Agnes's snow. And in return, no money exchanged. I would get a little apple pie. I would get apple cobbler. There was rhubarb growing in my yard, so she would make apple rhubarb cakes. It's amazing how those things from our parents translate into life. Other things that my mother taught us were about money. She would take us to the grocery store and purposely send us through, give us $5 and send us through another line to go buy a loaf of bread or some eggs so that we knew how to do transactions with people and give money and count change and get change back. Very practical. My mother also taught us to sew. She had a sewing machine, big sewer. When I was little, I think most of my clothes were made by my mom. And so when I was younger, in my 20s, I made so many of my clothes. And if you don't sew, you can't imagine what fun it is, but it's a lot of fun because you actually create and design what you can wear. All of those habits have carried forward with me today. I enjoy gardening. I love plants. I love the great outdoors, love sewing, love crafts. Those things give us a foundation for how we interact in life, how we view money, how we view spending money, what we value. Whatever your values are, they are important. And you should never let those go throughout life. Things that our parents taught us that were very good can help us continue to have those good relationships with our parents when we are older. Sibling rivalry. How many of us are sure that one of our brothers or sisters were mom or dad's favorites, or that we get all the hand-me-downs? One of my sisters would continually say to my parents, "Oh, John, my brother named John. John is your favorite. You all spoil John." Or when we were young, we may have been jealous that a sister or a brother got a hula hoop. My oldest brother had train sets and erector sets. I don't know if you remember those. They were kind of mechanical toys that you played with that I thought were pretty cool. But how many of you are thinking about this and you're laughing to yourself thinking, "Oh, I remember that. And my sister is still the favorite," or "my brother is still the favorite." If you had brothers or sisters, these situations happen to all of us. How many of you have a brother or a sister, though, who holds on to a memory of something that you can't remember? For example, your sister might remember a time that you were mean to her. She tells you the memory of this story every time she sees you and how she's still heard about this 30 years later. You apologize, but honestly, you can't remember the situation. You don't know what your sister's talking about. But yet, the interesting part is your sister has held on to that memory for 30 years. So obviously, it was very painful for her. When we see those situations, it's up to us to realize that there may be more to that than meets the eye. There may have been other situations where your sister felt like she wasn't treated very well by other people. Maybe she was bullied in school. Maybe people made her feel self-conscious or criticized. These experiences pile up when we're young to make us the people that we are today. But they also establish these behavioral patterns that can be positive or negative, which leads us to the subject of minimizing drama. Elderly parents, brothers, sisters, friends, and coworkers who place themselves in that role of a victim or someone who doesn't feel good about themselves, they're attracted to drama. Victims delight in creating drama, pushing your buttons, upsetting you. Drama usually results from understandings like we talked about before. It results from overreacting to something, poor communication, confusion, triangulation. You want to be as clear, as factual in all situations as possible to avoid this. Be respectful of people. Don't talk behind their backs. You'll notice that people who see themselves as victims will share stories of events that were traumatic or painful. And their goal is to gain your attention. They want sympathy. They want to complain. They want to blame others for the games that they play without taking responsibility. Victims thrive on drama, and they enjoy bringing drama and trauma into your life. In my career, I had a coworker who would always go around and she would say, "Oh, those mean girls. Those mean girls do this and those mean girls do that." What I learned over time was that my coworker was actually the mean girl. It wasn't everybody else doing things to her. It was her behaviors and her interactions causing negative reactions in other people. She triangulated, she gossiped, she was so disrespectful of other people, and she loved creating drama. She loved the attention, yet she didn't realize that she was the mean girl. I don't know where she is today. I don't know if she ever realized that, but it was a lesson that taught me a lot about being very purposeful in avoiding gossip, in avoiding triangulation, and stopping that in the workplace. When I had my care management company, I would tell my staff, we don't gossip, there's no triangulation, we don't do drama here. If you're a person that likes drama, you will not be happy in this workplace because we don't support it. It doesn't exist. We respect each other. It's important for all of us to do that, to avoid these drama, trauma, family situations, and these situations in the workplace. There are family situations where parents enable or fail to set boundaries for adult children. Some adult children never leave home. They are still living in your parents' basement. Other children never become financially independent, and they may rely on mom and dad for money. These children, the ones in the basement, the ones that still are dependent on your mom and dad, those are your brothers and sisters that your parents have enabled to fail because they didn't know how to set boundaries. Children who are disabled from birth do not fall into this category. That is a whole separate situation. These enabled children, this enabled child, is your brother or sister who can't hold down a job, keep an apartment. They just seem to never succeed in life, and they keep returning back to your parents to support them, when instead a parent should start saying no and setting boundaries. This brother or sister of yours is financially and emotionally dependent on your parents. You watch this situation go on for years as your parents continue to enable a brother or a sister to avoid learning life skills and how to be self-sufficient. And you don't say anything. This turns into an elephant in the room subject, because what happens when mom or dad need their money to pay for their care? Or they have to think about selling the family home and your brother or sister is still in the basement. Your brother or sister can't go and get a job and support themselves. Your parents are going to feel more guilty. It's going to be an impossible situation, and it's going to throw some havoc into your family. Some of you probably can't believe that these situations happen. I can tell you that they do. I have been involved in so many of them over the years. And I want to share the story of Lily. Lily was a 52-year-old child that I met who was still living in her parents' basement. At the time I met her, both of her parents had just passed away. The house was a disaster. There were dirty dishes in the sink piled up probably from like a month. The upstairs of the house was filthy. The basement area where Lily lived was even worse. Lily was dressed in clothes that looked like she hadn't changed them for months. She had a body odor. Her teeth were abominable. Her hair was a mess. She had a fungus on her face because she hadn't washed her face in 2 months. These are real situations. They're very sad situations. I became Lily's court-appointed guardian so that I could help her. And it was a long process because her parents did a huge disservice to Lily. Lily had learning disabilities. They never helped Lily learn. Lily didn't know how to wash dishes. She didn't know how to cook. She didn't barely know how to use the washer and dryer. She was never forced to take care of herself to have a good appearance, so her appearance was messy. She didn't like to shower. Getting into the shower was a huge task to get her to shower once a week at the beginning. She didn't know how to manage money. I initially would give Lily an allowance, and Lily would go out and buy frozen pizzas and candy bars and junk food when she was supposed to buy good food and things that she actually needed. She didn't know how to manage money. Eventually, I ended up moving Lily out of her home into an apartment for a year to see if we could make an apartment work, to see if Lily could shower and learn how to spend money and take her medications and brush her teeth and all of that. And to no surprise of anyone's, Lily failed, but we had to give Lily the opportunity to fail. After that, I moved Lily into a group home where she was more successful because she was with other people like herself who had learning disabilities. And there was a house mother, if that's what you would call the person who managed the house, who taught good habits to all the people that lived there. They became a community. They had meals together. They would go out and do projects in the yard together. It was as much of a family situation as one could find in a group home as possible. And that family situation allowed Lily to learn practical skills that we do every day that we don't think about. And it helped Lily learn how to succeed in life without parents who did not help her succeed. Some of you, again, can't imagine this. Some of you have this in your family situation. It is possible to find solutions. You have to be proactive to do it. Let's talk more about PD, personality disorders. Dependency issues with brothers or sisters begin in childhood from experiencing trauma, abuse, violence, neglect, or poor parenting. We can have a personality disorder from these events. Some children move out of the home, they never come back. Others may never move out. Some move out and keep returning because the parents allow them to keep returning. In addition to children having personality disorders, our elderly parents can have personality disorders. As young children, we don't notice them because we don't know any different. We may not have a good relationship with our parents. We may not know why. We move out, and it's not until many years later that we become involved again in the care of an elderly parent that we think, oh my gosh, mom or dad is crazy. That is likely because of a personality disorder that they have, that now they are being forced to do things that they never thought they had to do, or react to situations or manage situations they never thought they would have to do. When couples are married, usually the responsibilities will be divided between partners. And let's say in this situation, your dad took care of everything and your mom really didn't have to do anything. Dad passes away. Mom is in a situation where she doesn't even know how to write a check. Her personality disorder becomes more prominent. And now you're realizing how your dad managed this or buffered it or covered up her personality disorders when they were married to shield you children. People with personality disorders have difficulty making or maintaining relationships. They have difficulty emotionally connecting with other people. They may seem disinterested, distant, may have no emotional ties. They may have difficulty managing or controlling their emotions. They're up, down, they're all over the place. Unable to cope with life, unable to cope with complicated feelings. They're unable to control their behaviors or their impulses. What we see in elderly parents with personality disorders are long-standing habits that become more severe when they need care, when they feel that they can't control situations. Behaviors worsen as our elderly parents feel more out of control. As we place more pressure on our elderly parents to make decisions, to take care of themselves, their personalities get worse. As a result, that controlling behavior, their complaining behavior, being able to get along with others, it's magnified by 1,000%. Caring for elderly parents with personality disorders, it can be a constant challenge. We have to learn how to set boundaries that we'll talk about in the next part of this program, in how to care for elderly parents with personality disorders so that we don't go crazy ourselves, or so that we don't feel like we are in an impossible situation doing a bad job. Our brothers and sisters who never left home or who move back into the home, many of them expect a free ride from elderly parents. By the time this happens, the parents have established a codependent relationship, meaning that they're dependent on each other for attention, emotional support, daily activities. In these situations, the parents feel guilty about the fact that the child can't succeed. They feel guilty about the child's lack of success. So what do? They provide free rent. They ask nothing in return. They don't put any responsibilities on that child. As a result, your brother or sister, they don't do anything. They may live in the home rent-free, watch television all day, eat your parents' food, listen to music, ask for money. These adult children who are dependent on elderly parents, they become a significant issue at the time that care is needed. And it's hard on the parents, because when the parents think about using their own money for their care or selling the house, parents worry about where that resident child will live and how they will survive. You, as the brothers and sisters, it's up to you to figure that out. Your parents created this problem. If they knew how to solve it, it wouldn't exist. This brings up feelings of entitlement. Children who never leave home may believe that they are entitled to the money and the home of your elderly parent. Their physical presence and the way that your parents enabled them leads them to feel like all this is theirs. They have earned it somehow. They should have the house. They should have the money of your parents. These dependent or entitled children cause significant issues within families when this issue hasn't been discussed. When the elephant in the room is allowed to go on for years, this situation becomes a nightmare to manage when you come together to care for elderly parents. Through the years, resentment may have kept you and other family members away from the situation because you didn't want to upset your parents, you didn't want to have arguments. Your parents wouldn't listen to any of your concerns. They wouldn't take any action. Now you're at a point where you don't have any choice but to become involved if you want your elderly parents to receive the care that they need. Talk to your elderly parents about this. If those discussions go nowhere, it might be time to consult an elder law attorney to look at options. The other choice is you can walk away knowing that you're going to look the other way and you won't participate while you watch your brother or sister take advantage of your parents. That is not really the thing to do, but sometimes adult children don't feel like they want to participate in knockdown, drag-out battles with parents, although it can be, and it is the right thing to do sometimes. Those are many of the situations where I was appointed as a guardian. Inheritance, money. Inheritance is another family financial issue best discussed years ahead of your parents' need for care. If you are a successful child, you're less dependent, you are less interested in your parents' money. Those children who feel entitled and who depend on an inheritance are less successful. They've more than likely been dependent on your elderly parents for part of their lifetime or all of their lifetime. As you can imagine, the differences in your beliefs and your dependent brothers and sisters' beliefs are significant. These differing beliefs about inheritance cause issues between adult children and elderly parents in caregiving situations. Some people, parents, can look at their children and realize that they're not good financial managers. And this kind of leads into talking about power of attorney. In those situations, parents realize that children who can't manage money will not decide in the best interest of elderly parents. They won't follow the directions of elderly parents written into power of attorney documents because the children can't. They've never learned how to manage money. If they've never learned how to manage money, how can a parent expect them to manage their money or take care of them? For this reason, this lack of trust by parents, I was appointed by many single adults, married couples in their estate plans as medical and financial power of attorney, trustee, and personal representative of the estate. Everyone has the option of selecting professionals to act in these roles. If your family has a situation with a dependent brother or sister, it is up to you to initiate conversations with elderly parents about what could happen when your parents need care. If you're in this situation and your parent already needs attention, that communication may be a little different. You may have to press the issue. You may have to get attorneys involved. You may have to report to Adult Protective Services. We'll talk more about that. So look at the situation this way. Is your brother or sister living with your elderly parents providing any type of care? Many times elderly parents believe that if the child is living in the basement, of course that resident child will step up and provide care. These assumptions by elderly parents that the resident child will provide care are unrealistic. If the child could commit to care for an elderly parent and be willing to do that work, think about this. That child would be able to get a job and move out of the home. It's not going to happen. If that parent's care is left to the resident child, care neglect, financial abuse, it's more likely to happen. Statistics confirm that elder abuse related to money is more often committed by family members, trusted family members, than strangers. It's important for you not to wear blinders. It's critical not to wear blinders where issues of family relationships exist. Elderly parents want to believe the best of all of their children. Sometimes it works out, other times it does not. If you anticipate issues with brothers or sisters or in-laws, if a second marriage has taken place, talk to your parents now so that you can avoid problems in the future. Create estate plans with specific provisions to make sure that your elderly parents get the care that they want and need. If it's going to be a controversial situation, look at appointing professionals that will alleviate the concern if there are suspicions that one child or a person will cause substantial issues. Estate planning documents can include specific instructions for the individual who is appointed. Professionals will implement the desires of elderly parents without all the emotional trauma that can result when an adult child is appointed to be power of attorney. In these situations, as I mentioned, I was appointed many times, and during the conversations about the appointment, I knew better. I talked about the elephant in the room. I asked if there were any family members that would be unhappy about me being appointed. I asked if there would be problems at the time the person needed care, if there would be disagreements about health care or money. In about 25% of the situations, this was the case. We added provisions in documents saying that I was not to release medical or financial information to some family members, that my brother is a doctor, but my brother does not get to decide about my health care. I'm telling you what I want. It's your job to execute it. There was a situation where I was the medical and financial power of attorney for a father who had a disabled child. The father unexpectedly passed away, and I became the trustee for the disabled child and also the personal representative of the estate. There was a prior marriage with a prior divorce. The ex-wife was shocked to learn that she was not appointed the personal rep and that she was not appointed the trustee for the child. This was purposely done by the husband because he knew that his wife couldn't manage money. He knew that his wife would not responsibly take care of that child or provide for that child the rest of the child's life. These are common situations in families, and it's best to address them up front in written legal documents where at all possible to avoid going to court later, to avoid legal battles that spend a lot of money later arguing about these issues. Talk to your parents about the elephant in the room. Do not ignore these subjects. If they exist in your own family, take action. Establish legal documents. Establish good people to be your power of attorney, your personal rep, your trustee. Can avoid a lot of issues in families years down the road. Power of attorney abuse. It happens in families. Know that the adult child living in your parents' basement may weave themselves into the legal documents of your parents without anybody else knowing. I have seen situations where powers of attorney have been redone, wills have been redone in the favor of the person who was living in the house because the parents were fearful that if they didn't agree to sign those documents, that person would not care for them. It's almost like being a prisoner in your own home. Financial abuse of the elderly is a family issue. It's most often committed by that trusted family member. I restate my earlier suggestion that discussions about financial matters, including planning for care and creating estate plans, are a must. Waiting until after the problem happens may be too late to hold a discussion. I've known many situations where children borrowed money or spent the entire bank account of elderly parents before anybody else even found out, and then it was too late. The money was gone. Your brothers or sisters who can't hold down a job have no way of repaying or replacing that money. Let's do a summary of why families don't get along. There are so many reasons. The reasons, as we talked about, can begin in early childhood and continue through adulthood. By looking at family situations, we can gain insight into ways to work together to care for elderly parents, to prevent or avoid these issues. Talking about the elephant in the room is the most direct path to resolving these issues before they get bigger and take more time, more trouble, more money, and sometimes going to court to manage. I'm Pamela D Wilson, caregiving expert, advocate, and speaker. I look forward to seeing you in the next webinar.